Hi everyone and welcome back to the channel. I'm Kirsty and this is Stuck in the Mud. In today's video I want to talk a little bit about how to stop being triggered by our obsessions in OCD and anxiety. Because when we actually make that step towards getting better from OCD and actually recovering, because OCD and anxiety is treatable, it really is, and this is something I have found over the years. You know, I've been dealing with OCD and anxiety for 40 years. And at first, when I actually started to seek out therapy in my 20s, because I didn't really have a formal diagnosis until that age, but I knew that I did suffer from it from I'd say from around the ages of 11 to 12. I really understood that this was OCD. But when I first started out with therapy, I think, and from my experience, I was always thinking that someone else would help me get better. You know, it'd be someone's job to make me better. And as I've got older and I've learned much more about OCD, I understood it wrong. You know, I'm going to have to do a lot of this work. No one's going to wave a magic wand and make me better. You know, it can be difficult and overwhelming when we start to recover from OCD, because we have to face some of our fears and actually, you know, be feeling some intense feelings at times, because in therapy and, you know, in getting better, we have to sometimes feel a bit more anxious, because actually going over these thoughts and intrusive thoughts and avoiding rituals, you know, when we have to do the work and you have to put the work in to get better, it can feel so scary at times, because we're having to face up to it and actually tell OCD that it's not going to rule our lives anymore. You know, we are in the driving seat. We can change our relationship with our thoughts and behaviors and actions. And if we can do that, we can actually break free from the grips of OCD. And actually starting out is the difficult part, because we're so used to doing things in a certain way, and we're so used to our safety-seeking behaviors that, you know, it's almost like a comfort thing in the end, because when we're doing those things, we feel like we have some more certainty over our lives, when in fact we don't. But it does make us feel better, because OCD is the doubting disease. And if we can gain that little bit of, you know, that feeling of safety by carrying out rumination or carrying out a physical ritual, you know, we can actually feel a bit of ease for a moment. You know, we get that sense of ease that we've done that and we feel a bit safer. But in reality, and I think deep down a lot of the time, we know that this is all irrational, but we do it anyway because we have OCD. But what if we can actually change our relationship to these thoughts, these obsessions, and we can actually see that by doing all this and by involving ourselves with our thoughts and by carrying out that ritual, this is actually not helpful. In fact, if anything, it's actually increasing our anxiety and all our fear response in these obsessions, because we're actually teaching ourselves that this is unsafe and we need some certainty over it. So by doing all these things, you know, by doing the rumination, by doing the rituals, by getting ourselves involved with everything, we're actually teaching our brain that this is unsafe and we need to do this. But if we can actually build a tolerance to all those uncomfortable feelings, when we refrain from doing the rituals, from doing the rumination, we're resisting those things, even though we're going to feel uncomfortable. And this is the difficult part with recovery, because, like I said, it's going to feel uncomfortable at times. It's going to feel distressing, because we're actually sitting with that discomfort, with that anxiety, with that kind of panic, you know, that feeling when you feel like you've got a panic attack coming on and you think you can feel it sitting there. But we're actually starting to tolerate these feelings, you know, the feeling of shame, of guilt, of, you know, that we're not actually involving ourselves in these compulsions anymore. You know, we're just sitting back and we're letting them be there. We're not actively engaging with them because it's trying to get our attention. OCD's always trying to get our attention any way it can. And the thing with avoidance, because this is a big thing with getting better, and avoidance is actually a compulsion in itself. And I didn't realize this at first, and I did this for a long time. And I would actually actively avoid certain situations and topics, things I would read. I would actively avoid them because I knew that that was going to heighten my anxiety, and I would be so terrified of this becoming a new obsession, or, you know, resurfacing an old obsession. So I'd actively avoid certain subjects that actually gave a fear response in me, you know, and I would do it. I wouldn't engage in those kind of topics or even read about something. You know, it limits your life because we're always on the lookout for that danger. And once I realized that this was actually an OCD compulsion, and I was avoiding things because I didn't want to get triggered by certain subjects, and it's been various things throughout my life. Like I say, the obsessions have changed with me, and whichever kind of type of OCD you suffer from, you know, these avoidances are going to be different. You know, if you had contamination OCD, you might resist, you know, touching things in public. And, you know, we're telling our brains there that this is unsafe and we need to carry on doing this. But when we can lean into that uncertainty and actually force ourselves out of our comfort zone, and we have to be in a place to do that. We know sometimes when we're not in the right headspace at that time, it can be, you know, it can not be the best time to do it. We have to kind of be willing to try our best to get better, and that isn't easy. It's a big task, but it's so freeing, you know, when you think you can have your life back after so many years of doing everything that OCD has told you to do. And, you know, we can actually live our life without the constraints that OCD puts on us, because it really does. You know, we can be, you know, we might not be that conscious to a lot of the things we do with OCD, because I know I wasn't for a long time, and I was avoiding things that I knew were triggering for me. Like when I had OCD around harming my children, that was after my third child, and for a time there, I would stay away from my children. I wouldn't engage with them in any way because I was so fearful that by engaging with them that I would then get more false memories around the fact that I may have done something that I don't remember, and I was so afraid of being with them, so I would refrain from being with them for some time. But as I actually decided to involve myself and carry out the work that I needed to do to get better, and this was all homework that I was doing with my therapist at the time, was to actually engage with these things and actually feel that discomfort when, you know, I'm getting that anxiety, you know, from just engaging with my children, which is so sad, you know, because this should be an enjoyable time, but I was so afraid of being with them for the fear that I would be triggered some way by the fact that I would get a new thought that something I had done. You know, I would get this thought that, what if I do something and I just don't remember, and it's not going to be clear, and I'm going to be ruminating over my memories. You know, it was a scary time. But it's all little steps and all these times that we can actively engage and not resist things, and actually not avoid situations and places and people. We actually do rewire our brain, because we're actually telling our brain that this is fine, and you know, everything was fine. I didn't, you know, nothing happened, you know, everything was safe. And we're actually teaching our brain that this is fine, you know, that we're actually engaging in stuff and it's not, it's not been catastrophic like OCD likes to tell us. And I'm aware that this sounds so simple and it sounds easy, and it really isn't. I know that because I've been through it. But it's all little steps in the right direction. And this is where you have to start at first. Don't think you have to expose yourself to every fear you've ever had, and every type of OCD is going to be different. And obviously it all falls within your moral compass and, ethically we're not doing here anything that is wrong. We're just engaging in things that are not rational. So I needed to engage with things that I was going to find uncomfortable at first. But every time I did that, I would actually teach myself, and I would break that fear response that I have that something bad was going to happen because I did that. I'm teaching my brain that this is fine. It's not going to be catastrophic because I involved myself with this particular fear. And I would have to put the same work in as well. So I wouldn't avoid things, but I would resist from engaging with the OCD thoughts that would come afterwards, which are, what if I did something wrong? What if I don't remember? I had to let those thoughts be there and resist engaging with them, whether that's a mental rumination or whether that's a physical ritual. So I would have to resist those. And sitting with that feeling, those actual feelings we get, because a lot of people with OCD we're just so uncomfortable with that experience of feeling the anxiety, the guilt, the shame, all those feelings that we get, and the anxiety and panic. We're so fearful of that and experiencing that we will actively avoid things, avoid our fears, our obsessions. For me, I know I've always, since being a little girl, have had a fear of loss, and that is shown in my obsessions, which were always about keeping my family safe, keeping myself safe. It's always about loss, and that is something I really realised as I got older. And it's quite a normal thing to be afraid of. It's a fear I think most people have, but it became an obsession with me to the point that I was carrying out rituals day and night just to keep my family safe. And as I got older, the physical rituals decreased, but they would still carry on in the mental sense that I would just go over and over things. And even doing mental rituals like counting, I would do things like that. So they weren't necessarily that noticeable, but I knew I was doing them. And I was avoiding subjects because I had grown up with my mum and dad both being ill on more than one occasion, with cancer. And, that was a scary time when and I'm very compassionate with myself now. And I'll talk to myself in a compassionate way, because going through those things was difficult at the time, and fearing that you're going to lose someone and not knowing that certainty is scary. And growing up, it happened on more than one occasion with my mum and my dad. But now I look at it a little differently, and I don't actively avoid those kind of conversations. So I might have been actually triggered by reading about illness and things like that, and that is something I was avoiding at times. So I had to actually then not avoid those things. I would read about things, and yes, they would sometimes, I could feel that fear response still there, and I would get that increased anxiety. But if I just sit with that and let that be there and not actually get engaged with it, and because OCD is still there, it wants to get my attention, but if I don't give it what it wants, it fades. Because this was a thing that I went through, but it still had that kind of fear response in me, because it was something so delicate and something so emotional for me to actually experience. And for a long time after, I would always be triggered by certain things to do with illness. So over time, I have exposed myself to things, and that is in the standard OCD treatment of exposure and response prevention. But then I wouldn't engage with it afterwards. So I may read something, but I wouldn't actually try and work it out afterwards and actually ruminate over it. I would let those thoughts be there. If I felt like I was getting a little bit triggered, I'd let those thoughts be there, because that's how we handle it. And this is how we don't get triggered the same way anymore. Because if we just expose ourselves gradually to those uncomfortable feelings, they will subside and things will get easier. And it's all about taking those little steps. We don't have to do all of this at once. Having OCD is not your fault, but we can do something about it. We don't have to live this way, and we don't have to avoid those triggers, because the more we can tolerate those uncomfortable feelings, the easier it'll get, because our brain will actually realize that this isn't scary. We don't have to avoid this, and we won't get the same response. We'll break that fear response because we're not responding in the same way by actively avoiding it, which in itself, over time, it actually increases anxiety around the fear, around the obsession. So go easy on yourself. You need a lot of self-compassion with recovery from OCD, because it's hard, it's difficult, and there can be some actual, scary situations, scary obsessions that you've been carrying on for years, and unconsciously you may be avoiding things that you hadn't really realized, and it was carrying on the OCD and giving power to the OCD. It's making it stronger. Whereas if we can just sit with it and sit with that discomfort, it will actually lessen the anxiety in the end. And that is an amazing thing. If we can learn to tolerate that and coexist with it, not get involved, let it be there for as long as it wants. It's going to hang out there. It's going to try and trigger you and try and get your attention. But the more we can practice this with consistency, it gets so much easier, believe me, because I've been through it time and time again, and this has always worked. And this is the basis of metacognitive therapy, is letting the thoughts be there. It can hang out. We don't have to engage with it. It can shout as loud as it wants, but we can let it do as it pleases. We're just letting it be there. And that is a powerful thing for OCD sufferers, because we don't have to answer it. We're not going to work anything out by getting ourselves involved with it. We're just going to go round and round the OCD cycle and giving more power to OCD. But we need to take that power away. And that is how we heal from OCD in the long run, by doing all these little steps and stepping outside of our comfort zone. So let me know in the comments if this has helped you today. Let me know your experiences with triggering situations. We all do it every day. Everybody has things that we avoid, but when it becomes obsessional and when it becomes an actual compulsion with OCD, if we can become aware of that and that we're actually doing that, we can do something about it. And it just takes little steps. We don't have to do it all at once. And you'll get there, because I know you will. I know you can. So thanks for watching today, and I'll see you in the next video.